A Giants podcast for Giants fans
by Giants fans.
It's Shaun Morash.
On the sideline, into the end zone. Touchdown, Giants!
From the offseason to the wins and the losses, it's time to take one Giant step.
Welcome into One Giant Step. I'm Shaun Morash. He's Bryce Gelman. And episode 2 of Hard Knocks is in the books. Recite that play back to me, Bryce. Yeah, it's an X, not a W. Not happening. Unbelievable. Another good 41 minutes of TV, we'll call it. So we'll break it all down. Again, this is the One Giant Step podcast, the podcast, free on the Audacy app. And throughout the month of July, of course, every single episode of Hard Knocks, we will record and react to, like any of your favorite TV podcasts, all setting you up for our real Giants coverage coming your way in August with training camp, the preseason alike. So download, subscribe to One Giant Step. You'll get a little update every time one of these bad boys drops. Bryce, let me just start here. Before we get into exactly what we are going to break down, scenes that we thought were interesting, tidbits that we thought were interesting, obviously a setup into next week's episode, which, full disclosure, I have been told is the most fireworks episode of the 5 episodes, is episode 3. And if you get a little teaser there at the end. Overall, I believe that this episode number 2, the reaction without seeing anything on Twitter yet will be that of boredom for some, because a lot of time is spent at the combine, and I understand that. But just from a strictly football geeky point of view, I enjoyed this week's episode. That being said, I don't know that we get like a lot of really, really sexy talking points. There'll be a couple. But last week we came out with the Mara meeting with Shane, which I thought was interesting. A lot of the back and forth about the Saquon value, the Daniel Jones stuff. I think there was less overall juice, but more just interesting football geeky stuff in this episode.
That's what I asked for last week. That's what I wanted. I think I could speak for plenty of fans out there, real football fans, people who like, the football minutia and the stuff that you're not going to see in a lot of different national media places where you go to consume football content. They don't talk like that. They talk, big picture. If you turn on First Take, you're going to get the biggest news stories, and that's it. There's no breakdown of anything. So I think it was really cool to see not only just, like the football talk throughout the episode, just the fact that, you got those quarterback meetings. I think my biggest take, we'll get to our biggest takeaways, but they were like, I'd say 2 or 3 different scenes in this one episode that are big for the future, or like something that you could look at and you're like, all right, like that's a big deal. So I know you said it was kind of boring for the average fan. I get that. I understand. For me personally, I enjoyed it because that's exactly what I asked for last week, Shaun.
Yeah. So I want to get to very shortly my favorite scene of the whole show, which, just spoiler alert, is those guys, Dable, Shane, the coaches, in the meetings rooms at the combine going over stuff with the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. I thought that was great TV. We hear forever about the meetings at the combines, right? We always hear about these, and we never know what they really sound or look like. And we got a little taste, so I want to get to that in a second. But I'm going to start with one scene specifically because I feel like I need to apologize to the audience here on One Giant Step, the audience on Evan and Tiki, Monday through Friday, WFAN, and to a lesser extent, my audience on Twitter and X. And that is, I know better. I should know better. And yet, you were told without a shadow of a doubt in the scene where Joe Schoen is with, one of the heads of the Giants media relations department on how to sell the media and sell us essentially elephant crap. A whole shoveling of elephant crap. And why I need to apologize is, despite knowing better, we got that scene where the salary cap went up and we were interesting. And I'll take you back because it sat with me. It sat with me when Saquon Barkley signed elsewhere. I was so steadfast, Bryce, and you know this, that I did not want Saquon Barkley back at a high number. I do not believe in paying a running back. And I only wavered once from last year. And that was off of this press conference at the Combine when Joe Schoen did not rule out the franchise tag. And it just so happened the franchise tag number for a running back was the exact amount that the salary cap was increased by compared to what the Giants expected it at. So when you put those two together and Joe Schoen says that, I wavered and said, well, if Joe Schoen's saying this, now you almost have to franchise him. You can't just let him walk for nothing because you didn't trade him during the season. Now you got this gift of the salary cap. And then you see how it plays out and they don't franchise him. And the reason I'm apologizing is you see, we're told right then and there, you get that behind the scenes pre-media meeting where Shane basically cooks up the word salad where they knew all along they weren't going to franchise him. They knew all along that basically Shane, yeah, okay, come back. If the market really stinks for you, Saquon, of course, we think you can help the team in that regard, which is how the show basically ends this week. We know it didn't stink for Saquon in terms of what Philly went. But I need to apologize, Bryce, because never again should we ever believe a general manager's press conference when we got that really cool inside taste of how he is prepped before heading out there to meet the media.
Shaun, this has been going on for ages. Like, this is something that you always knew was the case with every single player, management guy, ownership. You know, like, every one of these guys is trained extremely well to not say the wrong thing. That is what the point of whoever that was in that meeting, who's the director of communication.
His name is escaping me, and I should know this because he has helped us out immensely at WFAN in terms of coordinating. I think it's Corey. It could be Corey. I think it's Corey. We'll just call him Corey.
I mean, you get the point. Director of communications is a very important job on any sports team, in any company, is making sure that you get out ahead of the information, you get out ahead of the news cycle, and you plant whatever you want to the media. And that's exactly what we saw. And it's something that was interesting. And again, I mean, if you know sports, you know that this is the case, because if you listen to any press conference, you aren't getting exactly what that person feels at that given time, because they're trained not to give the media exactly what they want, because especially in New York, guys like you on the radio are going to run with something that isn't necessarily what that person should have said.
And we ran with it, baby. We ran with the garbage we were fed. I look like an idiot.
Well, I mean, I guess it's easier to say now, hindsight's 2020, but I mean, all these guys are putting out complete garbage. They don't actually mean that.
Right.
So you learn your lesson.
To this moment, to this day, anytime, because I have fun with the Eagle fans. In many ways, Giant fans were so unhappy. And of course, we're going to get to this as Hard Knocks goes on. There were Giant fans that didn't like the idea that Saquon went to Philly. And I understand, right? You don't want to see a guy who was a lifetime Giant play for the rival Eagles. I totally get it. I personally preferred it. I know people think I'm kidding, but I'm serious, because I don't think it'll work out. And if I was steadfast and I didn't think it would work out with the Giants, of course, I would want the Eagles making that mistake. So anytime I've kind of trolled the Eagle fans, hey, enjoy his injuries, this, that, and the other thing, there have been a fraction of people that come back to me and go, remember that time you wanted him back? And it comes back to this press conference, because I didn't necessarily want him back, but I figured based on what Shane was saying, well, then he should be back on the franchise tag if Joe's telling us this. And we learned tonight that was total horse crap, absolute horse crap, and I bought it. So that part was interesting. Now let's just pivot to, we get a taste of Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, Drake May, then, of course, Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison Jr. all get to sit down. Brian Dable is running past certain plays with them. The idea of, how you would handle New York. Everybody's asked certain different questions that we were shown. Obviously, we didn't get the full meetings, but even getting a taste, I thought was fascinating. Obviously, we know the end result is the Giants get Malik Neighbors. But before that, I think this is really interesting from an NFL point of view, that we kind of got tipped off to the quarterbacks here. And you could see there was also a point before the meetings where they mentioned, we're going through the pros and the cons, Caleb Williams blowing off the press conference. I think the Giants, in many ways, maybe I'm overthinking this, were almost relieved not to be picking first overall, to have to make the Caleb Williams decision, which we discussed that in earnest. Harbaugh comes across here really bad because J.J. McCarthy looked really, really ill-prepared for writing a play on a whiteboard compared to what coaches seem to look for, but he pinned that on Harbaugh really quick and said this is how Coach Harbaugh wanted. So, again, felt comfortable at J.J. McCarthy, and now I question if he really is going to start early in Minnesota because it may take him getting some of that language down to be a little bit of an issue, which we all would be screaming and yelling about. Jaden Daniels, I thought, came across as a cool cat, fun character, a little bit different with, the way he was writing at the place compared to what David Wood, but I would have been fine with him. And of course, Drake May was like really quick on reciting a playback and everything, which is just so funny, Bryce, because when we did the whole draft prep, the two quarterbacks everybody circled back on, you felt the most comfortable about were going to be Jaden Daniels, going to be Drake May. And in the small snippets, knowing the Giants got neither of these guys and had editorial control, those are the two guys I think out of the quarterback room that came across the best.
I mean, you could just see the love that Dable and Shane had for Drake May. And just watching it from the naked eye, you obviously know what the case was before the draft night. The Giants were trying to trade to the third overall selection to take Drake May.
Wait, and it's portrayed here, Bryce. I'll let you continue when he goes and visits New England's box and tries to talk to
I'll get to that.
Right.
But you saw exactly the intent on the two of their faces with K, because I went back and rewinded to see if they had a similar cadence when it came to Caleb Williams, and they were just, asking questions. They knew that they weren't getting Caleb Williams. Like, they were asking whatever. I mean, it didn't seem like it was the be all end all. But with Drake May, locked in.
End all be all, by the way. End all be all.
I think
not be all end all.
I looked this up in high school because I heard people on the fan saying end all be all. I've been saying be all end all since we're gonna have to check that out. Well, that'll be something we do later for next episode.
I think you're dead wrong, but okay.
So I saw that. Like, I noticed that right away. I'm like, all right, well, this is obvious. It was as clear as day that those guys wanted Drake May. Something that I need to see. We're going to see the Saquon stuff. We're going to see the Brian Burns trade. That's already been teased. I want to see and hear the phone calls on draft night of them trying to trade up for Drake May, and not anyone else. The garbage reports that were put out there after the draft. The Giants didn't want him. That the Giants wanted Joe Alt.
Well, that was the other thing, Bryce. Real quickly. I know that the team has editorial control over this. I'm sure they met with offensive linemen. I'm sure they talked to Joe Alt. I know we will get to draft night and all of that, and maybe this will change. But at the combine, if Joe Alt and those rumors were really true, why not show them talking to any offensive lineman or considering it? Because you're not fanning the flames here with the quarterback stuff. I mean, he goes right from talking to Brendan Brown about the quarterbacks and what New England has to do to talking to them. So I don't want to hear any garbage about Joe Alt going forward. We saw what transpired here at the combine.
It was exactly that. And I'm going to bring up the scene. I mean, the fact that you saw Joe Schoen go down to the Patriots, whatever, box or suite, whatever they were in. This is funny. I got a good analogy for this. This is like every guy who's been in this situation. You got a girl you really like, and you're trying to convince them that you're the one and not anyone else. That's exactly what Joe Schoen was doing. He's like, hey, listen, if you guys have any ideas, you give me a call. I've been through that situation. Right. Speaking from firsthand experience, I've been in that exact same position. He knew that, he's like, you guys going to keep me in mind? Like, do you intend on, come on. I mean, that was a lot to ask for, especially when they're probably, at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 other teams in the NFL looking to trade up to that spot, because everyone knew that the 3 quarterbacks were going up the board right there. If you really wanted one of those top 3 guys, you were looking at that 3rd overall selection for the Patriots. You knew the Commanders were going Jaden Daniels 2nd. The only if in that top 3 was the 3rd overall pick and what the Patriots were going to do. And the fact that Joe Schoen went in there and actually expected them to do it, and maybe they did. I would love to see the finale behind this mini storyline in Hard Knocks and see exactly what happened. I keep honing in on that, but it's something that I really want to see, especially after what we saw here.
No doubt. Now, obviously, we get past the quarterback stuff, knowing the end result. It's kind of like watching House of the Dragon right now. If you kind of looked ahead, it's a prequel, right? We're almost watching a prequel to the draft because we saw this stuff play out. The Giants get Malik Neighbors. It's mentioned there several times, almost shockingly by Brown and Shane, that he wasn't as, I guess, crazy as they thought he was going to be, for lack of a better term.
We don't have a guy like that. Is
right.
The one thing
but they also expected him to be a little more, I think, let's just call it diva-like from a receiver point of view for what you was and they didn't really get that feel. They almost got a better feel of him. But Brendan Brown, of course, brings up a great point. Hey, the great players at these positions, they're not choir boys. And you're right. We don't need, we do need a player like that. And that's clearly Shane. This was the MO on Kayvon Thibodeau, too, if you remember. Shane didn't shy away from taking him. He's been totally fine since coming here. So I thought that was really interesting. I thought he came across well. But I will have to say, this is Tiki's guy. He's talked about this from the beginning of the draft on. I thought of everybody they talked to, quarterback and wide receiver, the one guy, and maybe I'm overreacting, 25 seconds maybe if we got of everybody, that I walked away going, that kid's going to be a leader and a freaking awesome player is Rome Odunze. Man, did he come across good. Just like hey, I'm going to be a leader in this life. He spoke football eliteness to me. And I would say this. I think Malik Neighbors, the sky's the limit. I totally don't mind the idea of, hey, you need a little dog in you, the non-choir boy stuff. But Rome Odunze, I'm almost stunned they didn't take Rome Odunze after that little bit because, boy, does he scream giant. The most non-controversial leadership type of player there is. But you know him from playing at Washington. He was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of Saquon, right? Like Saquon, the guy who's not going to, the leader in the locker room, again, like the football elite. I kind of took that away too. I was like, damn, this guy, he sounds extremely well-spoken. I don't necessarily know. It was also, this was teased, when Hard Knocks was originally announced and they started putting out the trailers and the teasers, that Neighbors interview was one of the main clips they used. We've seen it before. This was just, a refresher for all of us who saw the trailer. But I have to side with the Giants' of eventual drafting of Malik Neighbors based off the fact, and this is a whole other topic for another day, but if we're really going to compare the two, I think you draft based on talent, and Malik Neighbors, there's been no question about it that Malik could be the top of this draft class in terms of receiving.
Could be the best player in the draft.
Could be the best player in the draft. Rome Odunze, I think you know what you're expecting when you draft a guy like that. The leadership, the consistency on the football. You said versatility is the one thing that he feels he does best. And, he's got the perfect opportunity in Chicago. That's going to be exciting to watch, the two of them in Chicago. But I think they made the right decision at the end of the day. Personality-wise, who cares? Who cares? This team has so many other problems to address besides like culture or locker rooms. That all comes secondary to the fact that you need talent on the football field. Malik Neighbors is a game changer. We're going to see that this year. We've already been hearing about it, and this is something that we're going to continue to talk about as these weeks roll on. We've heard that he has been unstoppable in training camp. He's making unbelievable catches. You know who we heard the same exact thing about? Odell Beckham Jr.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. The other takeaway I had here, Bryce, before we get to the closing scene, which sets up everything, all right, before I get to this, side note, really cool that we got to see all the scouts at dinner and all the hard work they put in. Clearly, great story for them. This felt like, I'm going to use this word again, editorial control, right? The Giants get to decide what's in, what's out of the show, and that people will deem that a negative, and I understand that. This felt like major resetting of the public view of Brian Dable episode, all right, with relationships with people, all right? Let's start with this one. He's in there and he talks about, to Malik Neighbors, when he talks about, keeping your cool and doing all that, and Joe Schoen kind of laughs and pats him on the back, and it was the idea of, I'm going to tell you what I need to do, but you need to do too. It was almost like, I acknowledge what's going on. I lose my cool a little too much. So are you going to do that too, Malik Neighbors? Because I got to learn a little bit. It was like a wink, wink. For lack of a better term, wink. Then in the box, whether it's Joe Schoen making the 40-time running jokes, hey, if I start here versus Xavier Worthy, and I played a wings on the other side, they made him the fat funny guy in that spot. But sitting down next to Shane Bowen, chopping it up the whole time. Remember, him and Wink didn't have a great relationship. They made sure to do that. Joking with new offensive line coach Carmen Brasillo. Make no bones about it. Two big time additions to this coaching staff. The new defensive coordinator, the new offensive line coach. And those are the guys they are highlighting, basically Brian Dable talking ball with and having fun with at the combine, on top of him relaying the message to Malik Neighbors. This was all I don't want to call it an act. An act is the wrong word, but this was all very purposeful in my mind to show everybody, hey, there's nothing to panic here about Brian Daboll and his attitude and his dealings with coaches.
There's no bigger winner in this episode other than Brian Daboll. The fact that they spent, Shaun, like there was 3 to 5 minutes of Daboll just shooting the you-know-what with his coaches, with the person. Like it just like, it seemed a little targeted. Like it for whatever reason, I was watching it and I'm just like, like there's something intended behind this. The fact that they spent that much time, 40-minute episodes. These aren't hour episodes. Like they're jamming stuff into where they have to jam it. They edit it very quick. They turn it around or whatever. I mean, they had a few months for this. It's not like the preseason Hard Knocks where they have to do it literally week by week. But you could sense that there was something there in terms of like how they wanted to change the perception of Brian Daboll, because to your credit, to your point, there was a lot of negative stuff put out there last year. And this, listen, I'm not gonna come right out and say like this changes everything. We have to see how the team performs on the field. We need to see how he interacts with Shane Bowen, how you catch my drift here. Like there needs to be substance to this. There needs to be good results behind all of this. It's not just going to change based off one episode and 5 minutes of him being the funny fat guy and saying, "Oh, I care what I'm saying." I need to see more, and I'm sure you do, and all Giants fans do as well. But this is a good thing for him. I mean, at the end of the day, to the casual viewer, a lot of people were hating on him. It's congratulations, Brian. Good.
It's an image thing. Now, lastly, and this is where we'll wrap here. I'm curious on your thoughts on this. They're doing a good job with this show of really, really dragging out the Saquon issue, where I think it boils over in episode 3, I think, based on where we were at the look ahead. You get the call between his representation and then obviously the call with Shane and Saquon. And I'll just say this. Maybe I'm overreacting because he's no longer a Giant. I don't think Saquon came across well on that phone call with Joe Schoen. Again, for the second straight episode, we were talking about whatever the heck happened with Shane and franchising Saquon the year before, and the idea of being offensive with offers, and Shane also in that little meeting room he had with his PR person, making the joke, hey, I also offered him a lot of money last year and he turned it down, which was true. And that kind of gets forgotten about. You can tell it's a sensitive issue that Saquon turned down money and it bothers Joe Schoen. That was and is something frosty there with Joe Schoen, the GM, and Saquon. And when Saquon answers the phone, could you be a little more happy that this guy's telling you can go test the market? Could you be, I'm not telling you to go throw bouquets at Joe Schoen's feet, but he's giving you good news here. He's not going to hamstring you with the franchise tag again, which you very well could. And Saquon's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm with family. All right, yeah, man, cool. What do you mean circle back? Like, I don't know. I got terrible vibes from Saquon Barkley on that phone call. Maybe I'm overreacting, Bryce. You tell me.
It's funny that you say that, because right after the show wrapped, I get a text from one of my friends saying, wow, really made Saquon look good at the end. And I considered it. And now when you just brought it up, it does remind me of just all of the garbage that was put out there in the media. Like the last 3 months before. Obviously you're going back to the draft in those months, but the fact that every single week this was our talking point. Like, does he want to be with the Giants? Do the Giants actually want to pay him? This is all coming out now. I just got this disingenuous feeling from Saquon Barkley in that call. Like, it was like, as you said, he picks up the phone, and this is a very positive piece of information that he's getting from his GM, right, who did offer him money. It's not like he completely looked the other way and said, you know what, Saquon, you can F off. It was never that. There was maybe a slight amount of animosity from the year before, where the Giants were left with no choice, or in their own minds, to franchise tag Saquon Barkley. I get it, but that's the business of football. That happens all over. It happened with Josh Jacobs. It's not just you, Saquon. It looked like, and of course we kind of realize this as it's like with a breakup. Like, you realize who the person is after the breakup. You realize who that person really was. The second the Giants lost Saquon Barkley to the Eagles, he became an Eagle. on social media, getting all uptight. Like, do we ever see that? So I think that this is the first sign of who Saquon Barkley truly was in that scene. He picks up the phone. Be polite. This is the GM of your organization that you're technically still with.
And it wasn't even that he wasn't polite. Like, he wasn't rude, but for lack of a better term, bitching and moaning about getting franchised, the GM's basically telling you, no mas, I tap out on franchising you. I don't know. I don't know what I expected, but that was worse than I expected from a reaction from Saquon. It also tells me no love lost between him and the GM.
Well,
Real
Shaun,
quick.
The last thing I'll say about this scene is it's all for TV. Like, some people are just shy. Maybe.
But does
his
Saquon know it's all
hey,
for TV there?
You really think that?
I guess he's got to be informed that this could be used on Hard Knocks.
Not knowing that this is going to be used on an HBO series.
I guess that's not legal. You're right. That's probably not legal. So maybe he was just a little, microphone shy. Maybe he thought that his voice wouldn't. I don't know the situation. I'm not going to comment on it. We have no idea. From what we heard, it sounded a little disingenuous. So lastly, just from a week 1 cleanup too, Tim McDonald is owed an apology. HBO misidentified him in episode 1 as the older gentleman with the slick back hair that pushed back on Joe Schoen when it came time for, what's our offensive identity? It was the second time we'd heard it after Mara had spoken about it, and they dropped his name in there, and I didn't have a pen, or I didn't have to bring up my phone to write it down. I was in the middle of watching the episode, and they bring Tim McDonald back and re-identify him as the younger guy in the suite that's kind of making jokes back and forth. And I just think that I kind of crushed him last week on this podcast for being the other one pushing back on the identity crisis, when in fact it was not him. So, and I went back and that in episode 1, that's not the same guy. So he is in scenes in episode 1, but they, that little name thing on the bottom when it's the older guy pushing back. One thing I caught that I thought he was owed a little bit of an apology there. But Bryce, for me, overall, a nerdier, geekier episode. Again, an episode that I want to say as a football fan, I know we're talking Giants here on One Giant Step, I would have been into regardless if this wasn't the Giants. Is the kind of football content I crave in the offseason. So I really hope that people are watching this, and this is something that continues, man. I could watch Offseason with the Arizona Cardinals. I'd be into it. I love this kind of stuff. I think it's really cool, and I think it's really cool that we get to recap these Hard Knocks episodes each and every single week here on One Giant Step. So any closing thoughts from you before we get out of here?
There was a lot of non-Giants content in that, like the Sam Hartman stuff. I mean, of course, he's a beautiful guy. Yeah. He's a very good-looking guy. They were harping on that way too much. Yeah. Worthy, too. Of course, Worthy runs the fastest 40 time ever, and I understand that, whatever. But there was a lot of tidbits in there for the non-Giant fan, like the big storylines, the big talking points from the actual combine. So it made it, I guess, a little bit more of an easier pill to swallow if you're a football fan and not necessarily big into the Giants. You just wanted to consume some football content in the offseason.
Loved it. So you can follow at Bryce Gelman on Twitter, at Shaun Morash on Twitter. I'm on vacation from my normal work on Evan and Tiki all week. I will be back on Monday. So if you're looking for me there, free on the Audacy app, still listen to those guys. Of course, most of you probably not listening for me. Tiki's on the show. I'm sure those guys are going to break down. That sounded so egotistical.
Don't say that. No,
some of you listen for me, and I appreciate it. But we will be back. Me, Bryce, will be back next week to recap episode 3, which, again, I've been teased and told fireworks next episode. So I don't want to hype it up too much and be let down, but I think we'll have plenty to talk about next week on One Giant Step. So you're going to want to download, subscribe to us everywhere you get podcasts, free on the Audacy app. And we'll be right there waiting for you next week like a good turkey on Thanksgiving. Thank you, everybody, for taking one giant step with us.